Welcome to the After Chat. I'm Michael.
I'm Madison.
And today we're talking about why Jesus was necessary.
Yeah.
You ready?
I am.
Let's do it.
Welcome to the After Chat. Real questions. Real talk. Real life.
What's one piece of advice that you've received that you've always remembered?
It's super specific to me and how I function and communicate, but it's to include context before I just start stating something or asking a question. I do that all the time. I'll walk by someone and I can't even think of a good example other than, let's say I just walk by you in the hallway and I'm like, have you thought about adding hot dogs to the grocery list? And then you would just be like, what are you even talking about? And the context of that is months ago, we talked about the system with which Michael uses to create his grocery lists. And I'm just randomly asking him if he's ever considered this one meal to be a part of his system. I don't think to include the context of whatever I'm talking about. When, it's in my mind. I've been thinking about it, so you must know what's going on. I just forget. So including context is my very heartily used advice that I received. What about you?
I mean, I'm always down to put hot dogs on the grocery list, so I would have just hit no, but I will now. Yeah. Probably just as quick as you asked it. Yeah. No, anytime I see this question, I'm reminded of an episode in The Office where they asked Dwight Schrute what his best piece of advice was, and he said, Michael Scott once told me, don't be an idiot. And so before I do a thing, I ask myself, would an idiot do that thing? And if they would, then I do not do that thing.
Yeah.
So that just jumped out. Always just probably that. Yeah, some form of that. Yeah. I mean, that's pretty solid.
Think before you speak.
Think before you speak. It probably one of the things that my mom used to say to me the most was, the thing that's going to get you in the most trouble, it's not what you say, but how you say it. So I try to, even if I am saying something that's difficult, I try to be mindful of the tone because I don't always hear my own tone.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it can come across in a rather blunt fashion. I don't mean for it to be.
Yeah. I can sometimes be accidentally very blunt too. I think that has something to do more with the fact that I really struggle with some social cues. I've learned how to navigate the world of social cues, but it doesn't come naturally to me. So sometimes I will forget how to gauge my own tone along the way, particularly with text messages to my husband. I hurt my husband's feelings all the time because I don't type out text messages in a way that conveys proper tone. So he'll hear, and I did this. Oh my God, I literally did this to you.
Oh, you did last week. Last week that happened.
Yeah. So here's the story. That was funny. Michael's texting me, asking me about somebody who is interning here currently, just asking where he's at right now. And I had to follow up with this person and ask this person a question. So I am texting Michael and saying, in my mind, I'm saying, I just text him. I'm getting the information. I text him. And what Michael got as a text message was, just text him.
Exclamation point.
Exclamation point. And that completely opposite, telling you to go text him. Completely opposite. So I understand the tone. I do that to my husband all the time too. He really he uses a lot of punctuation and emojis and stuff to convey his tone. So when I don't, it stresses him out, and I do it to other people too.
That was funny.
Yeah.
I called immediately.
I know she is not.
I said, you just commanded me. You said, no.
I'm just on my phone. D. I'm going to get them.
That was funny.
Yeah.
One food that you've tried that you'd never want again, or Conversely, like what is a food that you are just obsessing on at the moment?
I'll go with the obsessing on because I'm a picky eater. So the list of foods, but I will try everything once. I'm a picky eater, but I'll give it a try. And I'll give it a try regularly. Like I'll revisit it as often as possible. But the list of what I avoid is longer than the list of things that I'm obsessed with. And right now, my like food of choice is specifically like cream cheese wontons. The last time I got them from Panda Express. And they were so good. And now I'm just thinking all day long about how I want Panda Express for lunch or for dinner. So yeah, I don't like crab rangoon because I don't like crab or seafood. But
love crab rangoons.
I just have an uncultured palate.
It's a shame,
yeah.
But they are so delicious. So a food that I'd never want again. I think I've mentioned before. I don't like pickles. I think they're disgusting. I don't like the way they smell. Any of it. But something that I've been obsessing on a lot here lately is I've been making these chorizo potato tacos, and they are fantastic.
Is that? I'm immediately picturing breakfasty. Is it breakfasty? Or
no, I mean, I make them for dinner and I put like this creamy avocado sauce on them. And so I use this, it's called Rita Fajita seasoning. It's from Blues Hog out in Missouri. Not a sponsor, but maybe. And so you take these potatoes and you cut them up into bite-sized pieces. You season them heavily with that and roast those while you cook an onion and the chorizo all together, and then heat up some corn tortillas. Yeah. And loving them. Absolutely loving them.
I guess maybe because potato, that made me think breakfast food, but it definitely sounds like not a breakfast meal. Sounds really good.
No, those are fantastic. I've been obsessing on those. I think the girls and I have eaten those probably once a week for the last month.
Nice. I love it.
Like those are fantastic.
Nice.
So recipe will be in the notes.
Yeah.
So we're going to be talking about Easter and why Jesus' sacrifice was necessary since we're cruising into the Easter season. So what is your favorite Easter memory?
So I have we had a tradition growing up with my family where we would on Easter Sunday every year we would go through I can't think of what they're called. Other people, it's not just specific to us, but it's maybe like the stages of Easter or the steps of Easter or steps of crucifixion or something. It's you use like an egg carton. And then in each spot of the egg carton, you would put like a little piece of something to symbolize that part of the moment. So like you would, like one of them has a little nail in it, and one of them has like a scrap of cloth or a thorn in it. And that was like really formational for me growing up, just having that rhythm of every year before church, talking through the Easter story as a kid with my parents and my sister. And we also kind of paired that with the tradition of, I think they're just called sausage balls, but it's like my mom would make it every year specifically on Easter Sunday. And it's like Bisquick, breakfast sausage, and cheese mixed together. I don't know if you include any wet ingredients. The breakfast sausage might be the only the only wet ingredient in it, or maybe you include eggs or something else. I don't know. I've never had to make them myself. They've always been made
fantastic.
For me. They're really good. We also had somebody here who, not this past 21 days, but our first year that we did 21 days at PCC, one of the guys that would come to our Powhatan campus every morning brought everybody who was involved on the last day the same thing. And he had like a regular version and then like a spicy version of it too. Oh. They were really good. Yeah, when they're like fresh out the oven, and they're so easy to make too.
That sounds fantastic.
Yeah, so that's my my favorite Easter meal.
We have those up. I know that they're here at this campus upstairs in PCC Kids, the egg thing with all of the things in it. I've seen them up there. Probably one of the things we didn't go to church or anything on Easter growing up, but we would always do eggs on Easter Sunday. And so I remember, I don't know if they still do them or if they still have the kits that you can get at Walmart or wherever, but it's these plastic things that you would put around the eggs and then you drop them into boiling water.
Oh, cool.
And then it like shrinks up. And so like you could have like a little panel from like Star Wars or Transformers. And
I didn't even know that was a thing.
Those things were awesome. And so we would make those and do an Easter egg hunt.
Kind of like shrink eatings, but it would like shrink around the egg?
It would shrink around the egg.
Wow.
And so it was super cool. And so we would do that and have an Easter egg hunt and like a big ham dinner.
Ooh.
Like that was what you did.
Ham definitely feels like an Easter food for sure. We did mostly like ham for like Christmas or Easter. We didn't really ever have it for any other holiday ever. So it's like pretty solidified in my mind there.
Easter and Christmas was always a ham.
Yeah, I'm really excited this year. We're gonna have a family gathering after church on Easter Sunday, which now it's super fun because it includes my nephews. I have 3 nephews and they're all under 5. So you get to have that fun age of like outside family time and doing stuff like egg hunts and stuff. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
That's great.
Yeah.
So where did you first meet Jesus?
It's a great question. I honestly sometimes struggle to answer questions like this because I grew up in faith and I have memories. One of my very first memories is I can't like picture it moment by moment, but it's in my mind of my mom holding me when I was very young and singing the classic hymn, Turn Your Eyes Upon Jesus. Like that melody is burned into my head. So I kind of struggle to answer where that exact moment was. I just know there were consistent moments along the way. But maybe that was the first moment.
Yeah.
Since it's burned into my memory, maybe it was that with my mom when I was a little itty bitty. Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. What about you?
So, I mean, I didn't grow up like I could in church or anything, but I've mentioned before, like in the back left corner of the big room here at the Powhatan campus. But it's interesting once you come to faith and you start looking at your life in hindsight, you see moments where Jesus showed up for you even in your unbelief. Yeah. At least that was true for me. I don't know if that's I'm assuming it's true for everybody, but that was definitely true for me. And so whenever you look at those, it's kind of bittersweet because you're like, gosh, Jesus was there for me even when I didn't recognize him, but he loved me even when I didn't even see him. So
that's cool.
And you kind of lament that you didn't notice him in the moment.
Yeah.
So that's always kind of, whenever I'm asked that, it always kind of brings up those two things. I
think I have a similar experience, but through the lens of this season in my life, I didn't have the depth of faith that I do now, or I was distracted by other things because I was being a rebellious teenager or a young adult who thought I knew what I was doing, and I just lost track of what I knew to be true. So I can definitely understand that. Like, Jesus was there even if I wasn't paying attention to it.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. So where do we go from here?
Well, we're going to be talking about why Jesus was necessary. And to set the stage for us, we're going to check out this clip from Pastor Elijah Schiarelli.
For by one sacrifice, Jesus has made perfect forever those who are being made holy. I absolutely love the way the Message paraphrase of the Bible puts it. I think it captures everything the writer of Hebrews was saying in a way that's much more modern to us. It's written like this: it was a perfect sacrifice by a perfect person to perfect some very imperfect people. By that single offering, he did everything that needed to be done for everyone who takes part in the purifying process. And this right here is one answer to the question we asked at the beginning. Who is Jesus? The perfect sacrifice. Laid down once and for all for you, me, and everyone who is to come. Jesus, who was the only perfect person, the only one capable of actually taking on sin because he was not infected with the sin disease himself, obediently did so and gave up his own life. He's the only one who could do it. And therefore, his sacrifice cannot and needs not be repeated. And it's only by this perfect sacrifice that we can live our fullest lives possible.
So I love how Elijah put that there, and he very succinctly laid it out, that a perfect sacrifice was necessary. And one of the things that Jesus did whenever you read the gospel accounts was say what he was going to do and why it was going to be necessary. And his followers didn't always recognize the why.
Yeah.
Like, why are you going to have to do this? Because they had such a different perception of what the Messiah was going to look like.
Yeah.
They were looking for a military leader, kind of in the vein of the judges from Old Testament, from the Old Testament scriptures. And a lot of the things that Jesus did for that was written in prophetic writings in the Old Testament. And so we thought it would be fun to look at some of those prophecies and how they were ultimately fulfilled. So
so the first one that we're going to check out is the detail that that Jesus's hands and feet were pierced. So when he was crucified, his hands and feet were pierced by nails. But in Psalm 22, verse 16, there's a verse that says, "For dogs have surrounded me; a band of evildoers has encompassed me. They pierced my hands and my feet." So in this scripture, David is describing some intense suffering that he's experiencing. He's feeling surrounded by enemies. But what's really interesting is that he mentions having his hands and feet pierced, which it's not like that happened to him personally, but it's to me, it's a clear picture of the crucifixion, even though that method of execution wasn't even around yet for the Israelites. And we can see where that was fulfilled, his hands and feet being pierced, in the Gospel of John, chapter 20, verses 25 through 27. So after the resurrection, when Thomas doubts that the resurrection even really happened in the first place, he says that he won't believe unless he sees the nail marks himself. That's why we refer to Thomas as Doubting Thomas.
What a way to be remembered.
Yeah, I kind of feel bad about that. Like he's trying his best. We all.
And it's even used as in a derogatory way to describe whether he's just a doubting Thomas.
It's just Thomas. Just let him go. Anyways, so he actually voices and says, "I want to see physical proof of this." And so then Jesus appears and tells Thomas, "Go ahead, touch the wounds." So we can see in that moment that part of David's prophecy was fulfilled.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I like the one that you're going to cover here in the next one, Isaiah 53. I mean, that's like the suffering servant.
Oh, that's
is
like
kind
one of my
of the
favorite
names
chapters
of that whole thing.
Yeah.
And so
if you are leading up to Easter Sunday, you're curious about more of this side of things, I would absolutely recommend reading the entire chapter of Isaiah 53. It's genuinely a beautiful chapter.
It is.
But the particular prophetic piece that we're going to pull from that chapter is the fact that he was crucified with sinners. And we're going to read Isaiah 53, verses 12. "He was counted among the rebels, yet he bore the sins of many and interceded for the rebels." So in this, Isaiah is talking about someone who would suffer for the sins of others, even though he was innocent. And this person would be treated like a criminal, even though he was actually making a way for other people to be forgiven. And we can see the fulfillment of that in Luke chapter 23, verses 32 through 33, that when Jesus was crucified, he wasn't by himself. There were two criminals on either side of him, and they were being executed, crucified as well. They were genuinely in that moment fulfilling those words of Isaiah, talking about being counted among the rebels. So he was placed in the same category as lawbreakers, even though he was completely sinless.
No, and even one of them talks smacked. I forgot. It's in one of the Gospels. I don't think it's in all of them, but I know that in one of them he also says, "Come on, dude, get on down if you can." And the other person scolds him for it.
Yeah,
and
which
says,
is
like we earned this.
Yeah, which is a huge. To me, that's a very powerful moment there that reinforces that, because the other criminal that is chastising the one for picking on Jesus is told by Jesus that today you will be with me in paradise, which to me really points believers towards the reminder of it doesn't matter how late in the game of life you are. When you turn your life over to Jesus, you are it's to be celebrated. It's exciting. It's never too late, if that makes sense. That one's really cool. Another detail in the moment of crucifixion is that Jesus was going to be given vinegar to drink, and we can read that in Psalm 69, verses 21. They put gall in my food and gave me vinegar for my thirst. So in this scripture, David is talking about deep suffering and betrayal. He talks about deep suffering a lot.
A good deal of David's writings.
I feel understood by David. I feel seen by David. He just knew some people got to get those emotions out. So being the mention of being given vinegar, which is you could also consider it to be like a sour wine, like wine maybe that had gone bad, or
I kind of read it like red wine vinegar.
I do too. I sort of picture it as like almost like a bad batch of like they wouldn't give it to anybody else.
Yeah. But
it was maybe intended to be good wine when it was made. That's not a historical fact. That's just what's in my mind about like where this came from. They're not just like pulling out like white distilled vinegar to put on a sponge, but it's still gross.
No, I imagine it was a disgust. I'm not going to drink this, but I will cook with it.
Yeah.
Kind of like that.
Yeah, I could picture that. So it's this like powerful imagery that David's using of being in a moment of need and being treated unfairly or cruelly in your moment of need. Being given something that's like the exact opposite of what you need, but it's close enough for it to really hurt.
Yes.
And be like, oh, that sucks. And we can read the fulfillment of that in John chapter 19, verses 28 through 30. And while Jesus is on the cross, he says, I am thirsty. And instead of offering him water, the soldiers gave him sour wine, just like the psalm prophesied, which is... That sucks. Like, that's awful.
Yes.
But
it's like I need this, but you gave me a bizarro twisted version of it.
Yeah.
Like I don't know if you've ever read or seen any of the shows that depict the monkey's paw, where someone gets a monkey's paw and then it will grant wishes.
Oh.
But every time you wish for something, like if you held this and said, I wish for a brand new car, you might get a brand new car, but it doesn't run or the motor's missing.
Something to it.
Yes. There's always some bizarro twisted version, and that's what you get.
Yeah. Man. That's crazy. Another detail in the crucifixion is the fact that it was prophesied that he would have no bones broken. So in Psalm 34, verse 20, we can read, he protects all his bones, not one of them will be broken. And in this psalm, what the context of it, it's about how God watches over the righteous. And while it applies very generally of God's protection over his people, it also points ahead to Jesus in a very specific way, because in crucifixions, the Romans, they would pretty much almost always break the legs of victims to speed up their death, which is disgusting. But the physicality of crucifixion is their arms are spread out and nailed to the cross, and they're holding at least some of the weight from being. If they relaxed their top half, they would be suffocating.
Yes.
But you can't really pull yourself up very high, so you would have to use your feet to push yourself up enough to breathe. If your legs are broken, you can't push yourself up enough, and then you're only relying on pulling with your arms. It makes you suffocate faster.
Yes.
Like
it's a way to just kind of put someone out quicker than otherwise they otherwise would.
Otherwise, they could hold on for like a significant period of time in this. It would function more as like a torture situation instead of an execution without breaking legs. So, getting a little grisly here, but
that's exactly what happened.
Fortunately, though, the prophecy in the Psalms it's hinting that that wouldn't be happening to Jesus, and that's true. In John chapter 19, 33 through 36, when the soldiers check on Jesus, they find that he's already dead, so they don't have to break his legs, and that ties him symbolically to the Passover lamb that is listed in Exodus chapter 12, verse 46, which was to be sacrificed without any broken bones. So that symbol of not breaking the bones of the Passover lamb was symbolically pointing ahead to Jesus, not having any broken bones and being the perfect sacrifice, just like this Psalms was also pointing ahead and predicting that his bones wouldn't be broken.
No, and that's one of the things that does make one of the reasons why Jesus is referred to as the Lamb of God.
Yeah.
Because he was the ultimate perfect lamb, like in the same vein as the Passover lambs.
Yeah, I'm always kind of curious how often that might, if that ever trips anybody up, that symbolically Jesus is referenced to both as a lamb and as a shepherd. There's different reasons why he's referred to as both, but I always get curious if that's ever like confusing for someone to hear for the first time.
Because he is also referred to as the good shepherd and the lion.
Yeah.
And so many paradoxical things.
Yeah. It is really cool, the depth of it. And I'm sure it's intimidating to learn about it all at first, but the depth of it when you can really dig into it is always fascinating. Okay, so this is the last thing. This is just interesting. This isn't necessarily something that was set up to be prophetic. It's just kind of an interesting connection that we thought would be fun to share with you guys.
Yeah.
And it's in connection to the crown of thorns that Jesus had placed on his head. So in Genesis chapter 3, picking up in verse 17, we can read, to Adam, he said, because you listened to your wife and ate the fruit from the tree about which I commanded you, you must not eat from it. Cursed is the ground because of you. Through painful toil, you will eat food from it all the days of your life. It will produce thorns and thistles for you, and you will eat the plants of the field. So this is going all the way back to the story of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden when the first sin happens. This is God talking to Adam and saying, this is the consequence of the choices that you've made will be the food that you'll have to toil to make your food, and there will be thorns and thistles. Before, I just imagine them just like casually strolling up to like any tree at any point in time, and there's something delicious in it.
Oh no, I know.
But now they have to work for it. So more context here is that in the Garden of Eden, after they sinned, the curse that was put on them was about the food that they would have to work to produce and the thorns and thistles that would be a part of it. But then because of that, thorns came to symbolize consequences of sin and brokenness of the world. So there was that symbol put in place all the way back with the first two folks on the scene. And I think the interesting connection there to Jesus could be that maybe because Jesus was given a crown of thorns to wear, it would symbolize him taking on the curse of sin. Because if the thorns are symbolizing sin and consequences, and he's wearing it while he is paying the price for everybody's sin, it's just
him taking on the entire full weight of it.
Yeah. It's I definitely have not thought about. I've thought through the lens of the crown of thorns as like sort of like a twisted way to mock the fact that he was
the king of the Jews.
Everybody else's royalty, not the Romans' royalty, but the Israelites. They were intending this guy to be their military takeover, be our king, you're our guy. Let's get the Romans out of here.
Yes.
And then the Romans are like, okay, you want a crown? Here's your crown.
Yes.
So I've always pictured it that way, but I've never pictured what other other symbols could come from that. So I thought that was really interesting.
No, I really enjoyed learning a little bit more about that as well. And that's not the exhaustive list of Old Testament prophecies that alluded to it, but those
take us a long time.
Yes, we could just sit here and rattle them off. Yeah. But that was just a few of them just to say Scripture spoke to it.
Oh yeah.
Before it actually happened. Yeah. And so one of the other things, and Elijah mentioned it in his setup, is like he made a way for us. Mm-hmm. And so there was the problem of sin that came from the curse that was addressed by Jesus's life and crucifixion and resurrection. So sin is just the problem. It separates us from God. It started in the Garden of Eden, like Madison mentioned, when humanity chose to disobey God and bring death and brokenness and everything into the world, and thorns and thistles, and it separated us, and physical death became the ultimate consequence of it. And so Jesus' death on the cross addressed this by taking the punishment of sin on himself. We just outlined some of the things that covered that and the symbolism behind it. But Jesus, it doesn't end there. His death and resurrection 3 days later proved that he had in fact defeated sin and death, and Thomas put his hands on the wounds and everything else, and that offers us the hope of eternal life and restored a way for us to be reconciled with God. And so just a couple of frequently asked questions about that.
Love a good FAQ.
Yeah, I mean, and I thought that it would be helpful here. So why does sin separate us from God? So sin separates us from God because it's a rejection of his perfect and good design for our lives. God is holy and pure, and sin creates a barrier between us and him. And so in the beginning, humanity was meant to live in perfect relationship with God, but sin broke that connection, leading to both spiritual and physical death. And so that's kind of the why. God had a plan. Adam's disobedience wrecked that and destroyed the plans that God did have for us. And so how does Jesus' death and resurrection fix that? His death on the cross took the penalty for our sin. It's a substitutionary.
Sorry.
Someone started shadowboxing outside of the door there.
That was entertaining.
And
you were on a roll
and
too.
And both of us have ADHD, so we both of us went that way.
You got it.
Okay, so here we go. All right, so how does Jesus' death and resurrection fix that? Jesus' death. So when Jesus went to the cross, he was taking on the substitutionary sacrifice for us. So in the Old Testament times, every year on the Day of Atonement, there was a scapegoat, and so what that happened, like all of the sin, all of the curses, all of the punishment were put on this one goat. And he was cast out. And so that was them, and all the other sacrifices. The priest would go in and sprinkle the blood of those onto the Ark of the Covenant, where God's presence dwelled. And so, but that was an ongoing, continual process until a human could actually do that and reconcile us with God. But no human ever could. So that's why Jesus came. And so his conquering of sin and death offered new life to anyone who would believe in him. So if you believe in your heart and confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord, you will be saved. And so through Jesus, we can be restored to a relationship with God and receive eternal life with him.
That's awesome.
So that is how Jesus' death and resurrection fix that.
I love that. So this actually, the clip that we listened to earlier, if you're interested more on the topic in particular of the fact that the sacrifice was perfect and ended that repetitive cycle of sacrifices for forever, that would be a great message to check out. But just kind of briefly to kind of summarize why such a perfect sacrifice was needed, it was because sin requires a penalty, and that penalty is death. It's the same penalty that was introduced when Adam and Eve first brought sin into the world. And only a perfect, sinless offering could fully pay the price. And since all humans are imperfect and we all sin, no one else can take our place. We can't cover it for ourselves. We certainly can't cover it for anybody else because we're all pretty screwed up. But Jesus is
proof.
Jesus came to the scene and he changed the narrative because he wasn't just a human. He was both fully God and fully human, which meant that he was the only one who could meet the requirements of being someone to be our substitutionary replacement and take on the consequences that were intended for us. And so his perfect life, it made him the only sufficient sacrifice to be able to restore that broken relationship with God. And now we get to be the benefit of being in right relationship with God and being able to commune with him and interact with him directly, all because of this price that was paid by Jesus.
Yes.
Because he was perfect.
Yes, and I love the next one here. This was John the Baptist right out of the gate.
Yeah.
Whenever he first sees Jesus, it's like this is the only dude that really got it.
Yeah.
I think.
like that early.
Yes.
Yeah.
That the second that he sees Jesus, look, the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world.
Man.
He was the first one.
Oh, that's so cool.
You know?
I'm reading through John right now, and I don't know. I haven't done the math to figure out where I'll land around Easter Sunday, but there's something about John in the Easter season to me, and maybe it is because of that. Because from the very beginning of his gospel, he is reinforcing the fact that Jesus and God are one and the same, and that God came to be a fulfillment of the word that was spoken by God when he came here on earth. It's a great.
Yeah.
It's so great.
No, and so when John the Baptist is speaking, that's John the Baptist speaking whenever he sees him. And, in the Old Testament, it was the Passover lamb was sacrificed for the protection of Israel. And the blood of that lamb was a sign for God to pass over their houses during the 10th plague, the 10th plague. And so Jesus is the ultimate Passover lamb, and that his blood is the only one that can truly protect everyone. And so John the Baptist is that dude. He just struck me as a wild man, like a Bear Grylls kind of guy out there.
Oh yeah, crazy.
Yes,
but like in the best. When you meet someone and you're like, they're a little weird, but like in the best way possible.
Yes,
I picture that as John the Baptist. I also just side though. I've always been kind of curious. You mentioned him being the only one that really got it that soon, but like I'm curious. Like they're cousins.
Yes.
Did he how soon did he know, and what was his reaction to it? Like I'm
have to imagine they talked about it growing up.
Yeah.
Like because they knew each other,
But I also I wonder, because there's so much of Jesus's rhythm while he was here on earth, at least in the early stages of his ministry, where he was telling people, it's not my time yet. Don't tell anyone about this miracle that I performed. Be quiet about it because it's not my time yet. I wonder if it was a similar case with John the Baptist, where he maybe didn't know about it until it was time for John the Baptist to start his ministry. It's stuff we won't know, but I'm just
there had
curious.
to have been background conversations between them.
Yeah. I'm always wondering about that.
And I'm going back a little bit to the prophecies and things. Like the Pharisees and the Sadducees and everybody else, do you think part of the reason Jesus got so frustrated at them was because they should have known better? They was like, you know what? You guys know this stuff. You memorize it. You're out there running around teaching it to people. Like you should know better.
There's a higher cost that you pay when you sign up for leadership.
Yeah.
To me, Jesus fussing at spiritual leaders that are missing it and are so focused on the details of the letter of the law and how interacting with anything that subverts culture is so jarring to them. He must have been super frustrated with them. But
I imagine that would have. Whenever you go into a space and you're looking around at people that know better, it always ratchets up your level of frustration with them.
Oh yeah, yeah. I'm sure that's what caused him to be so aggressive when he was at the temple and tore things up in there. He was so upset because it was the direct opposite of what you should be doing in that space. It seems like it'd be the same for these spiritual leaders who are doing the direct opposite of what they should be doing. So yeah, interesting.
So another thing that I thought would be interesting to talk about, because the cross was used as a symbol of humiliation for the worst of the worst.
Yeah, like murderers.
Yes, and Jesus got that, but Jesus kind of flipped the script on it, and it became and there's also references to, the stumbling block that causes people to fall will eventually become the cornerstone. That was also a reference to Jesus. Jesus is the ultimate stumbling block for a lot of people, but he's also the cornerstone of faith for a whole lot more.
Yeah.
And so I thought that it would be interesting. So we're going to look at some stuff that Martin Luther talked about.
I love Martin Luther.
Way back in the day, and he saw God as a God of paradox, and the cross was central to this idea. He argued that God's ways often appear opposite to human expectations, where most humans would naturally want to lash out in fury and anger and rage, like God argues for forgiveness, where people were expecting a military and political leader.
Yeah.
Jesus did none of that.
No, he washed people's feet.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, he did none of that. So
Yeah.
So the cross was central to that. And he argued that God's ways often appear opposite to human expectations. And what looks like weakness is actually strength, and what seems like failure is actually victory. So kind of the key idea here is the theology of the cross versus the theology of glory. So he contrasted two ways of thinking about God. The theology of glory is that this is a human tendency to expect God to work through power and success and visible triumph. And I mean, that's God's prerogative, and he can do that. And there's things where he has done that, where he did things through big, amazing things like raining sulfur and fire and all of the things like that happened.
Yep.
The flood was probably a big one.
Oh, yeah.
But it assumes that God's ways align with worldly wisdom and strength. The theology of the cross, on the other hand, was God's true way of working. Instead of revealing himself through earthly power, God hides himself in suffering and weakness, most clearly in Jesus's crucifixion.
Yeah.
And so he taught that the cross kind of flips everything upside down in that way. So in Colossians 2:15, this is where Christ conquers by dying. And having disarmed the powers and authorities, he made a public spectacle of them, triumphing over them by the cross. And so what looked like defeat was actually a massive victory over sin and death and the powers of darkness that's we now have access to. And God's strength is revealed in weakness in 2 Corinthians 12:9. But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I will boast all more gladly about my weakness, so that Christ's power may rest on me. That's Paul talking about the thorn in his flesh. In our own weakness, when we are going on Christ's grace and faith, where we appear weak, we're actually at our most powerful because we are in full reliance and recognition on him. And so that's where it's helpful to have a healthy self-image and not think of yourself too highly when compared to the one that we serve.
Yeah, that's so true. Man.
And then another one, the true life comes through death, Romans 6:5-8. For if we have been united with him in a death like his, we will certainly also be united with him in a resurrection like his. Wow. For we know that our old self was crucified with him so that the body ruled by sin might be done away with, that we should no longer be slaves to sin, because anyone who has died has been set free from sin. So now if we died with Christ, we believe that we will also be alive with him. Whenever you hear like you have to die to self, like you have to surrender all of yourself over to him. Your sin, your guilt, your shame, everything. You let that go, and that is the true path to life in Christ.
Yeah.
And so I love that. And then the last one here, the greatest revelation of God's glory is in the humiliation of the cross. And so in Philippians 2:8-9, and being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to death, even death on a cross. Therefore, God exalted him to the highest place and gave him the name that is above every name, Because Jesus humbled himself to the point of death, God exalted him, proving that our true glory comes through humility and sacrifice. And that might happen through your obedience to him. But if that's what our master was willing to do, and a servant isn't above his master, and we serve him, then as long as we're obedient to God, we will ultimately be exalted, just like Christ was. So I really love those examples. There's entire studies on everything else, but I thought that would just be an interesting thing for us to ponder and think about, and just a different way to view the actual crucifixion of Jesus. It's
so countercultural to anything that had been done before that moment, like, and anything that has happened since then. Like, it's every time that God moves, he moves in a way that you learn more about his character when you watch how he does it, and being able to pay attention to things that feel like really small details in the story of Easter. It might seem like it's just sort of the same old story.
Yes.
But there's always something new to notice about God's character and the way that he takes care of us and makes sure that we are, able to have our fullest life possible, like through him. Like I don't know. I don't have words for exactly what I'm feeling right now, other than just
when we look
awesome. Awesome.
And when we look at the character that Christ demonstrated for us, it does go against our own natural inclination.
Yeah.
In a whole lot of ways. There's an episode of Seinfeld where George discovers that every instinct, every choice, everything he's ever wanted to do was wrong. And so if that was the case, then the opposite must be true. And so whenever you look at the event itself, everything that we would have been thinking of for a leader, for a Messiah, for all of those things, for the Son of God, like you just imagine like a Superman-esque figure flying around, doing all the things, righting all the wrongs, but that's not what happened here. It's the exact opposite of that. Yeah, and it really is. I love that God is a God of paradox.
Yeah, and I love that that's even consistent in a lot of what Jesus said and did while he was here on earth before you even get to the story of crucifixion. Like his first public sermon starts off with some paradoxes of people who are meek actually being the ones who should be, exalted and put above other people, and whoever is first shall be last, and whoever's last shall be first. Like there's consistency in Jesus' teaching while he was on earth of similar paradoxes that were also incorporated in how he sacrificed himself for us.
Like, do you imagine someone said, "Stop speaking in riddles, man"?
I know. Yeah, like especially it depends on what translation you're reading. Right now, the one I'm in, I think I read in ESV most often, and it's always "truly, truly, I say to you." But in other translations, it could be like "verily, verily," or anything. I'm like, I wonder if people were ever like, God, like, oh, get to the point. Like, I wonder if they were like, here he goes again. He's going to tell a story I won't understand. Just funny.
But I love that. I mean, but even that was a prophecy. He will come and speak in parables. Yep. And Jesus even says, if you have ears to hear this. Yep. Yeah. Like, if you're actually seeking the truth, it will make sense to you.
You're going to dig into it and figure it all out, and like know you're going to have the less that you are in need of being the one that's right and knows everything, the more you're actually going to get it.
Like if you show up with an empty cup.
Yeah. It's going to get filled.
It's going to get filled.
Yeah. That's cool.
So what does this mean for us today? Like, where do we go? What do we do with it?
I think that there's something to be said for experiencing some corporate worship on Easter Sunday. So I would say if you're checking this out and Easter has not happened yet, figure out how you can get to one of our campuses on Easter Sunday, because it's going to be a great time.
Yes.
And then I also think that there's an opportunity to reflect either leading up to the Easter season or pretty much any time. If you're watching this later and it's nowhere near Easter, this is still something like important and critical that you could spend some time reflecting on. So I would recommend maybe choosing an area of your life where you feel that weak feeling, where you're stuck or you're defeated or you don't really know how to navigate whatever is going on, and practice bringing it to Jesus in prayer, being able to trust that his power is at work even in the midst of whatever you're struggling with, and find some assurance there in that, like, that real life example of putting trust in him and taking something to him and putting it at his feet. Having a moment there where you remember that it's all because of him, that hope wins, that grace reigns, and that death was defeated.
No, I love it.
Yeah.
And whenever you do go to God in prayer with those areas where you feel stuck or guilt or shame or defeated or any of those things, the more raw you let that prayer be, and the more honest that you are, and just do it in plain spoken words, not hiding anything, not holding anything back. Yeah. It does something whenever you're honest with God and yourself in that way that nothing else really, really can. Yeah. And that's one of the most beautiful things about prayer, is that God invites you to come and just be open and honest and real. Yeah. And so I would very much encourage that.
Yeah, I also would, again, just like to reiterate, check out Isaiah 53.
Yes.
Like the whole chapter. If there's something that you don't understand, leave it in our comments or in our Facebook group, and we can flesh that out. But that is like a great way to kind of set up the idea of the paradox of what happened and the prophecy that was put into place ahead of time. It's a fantastic chapter.
Love it.
Yeah.
All right. So leave us a review, like, share, subscribe. I know that it sounds silly to say those things, but it actually really does help.
Yeah.
Leave us a review, and we will send you an After Chat mug. And we will see you back here next week for another episode of the After Chat.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us for the After Chat. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and review. To be the first to hear our next episode, be sure to hit the subscribe button and get notifications for new content. You can also follow us on social media on Instagram at PCC Wired and Facebook at Passion Community Church. For additional resources and links, check out the description. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time on The After Chat.